Hello and welcome to SpeakEasy. The protests in Jantar Mantar and in other parts of the country have really galvanized the nation. A sign of hope, a return to democracy. What does it all mean? To understand a little bit more about what the protests were about, what they are, and what they might imply in the future, I'm delighted to have with me Neha Bora, one of the persons who was very central in the protests, a face of the protests, if I might, and someone who fasted for 23 days, which in itself is quite an achievement. So, Neha, thank you for talking to SpeakEasy and Frontline.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, I'm sure you're the national president of the All India Students Association, and you must have participated and led many protests before. So, tell us what was different about these protests and how come they came to galvanize so many people, of course, offline and also online.
I think these protests, initially everybody was skeptical about it. Our participation in it meant not appreciation for the first time, but questions, scrutiny, all of that. So when on 6th of June, if I'm not wrong, the first call was given at Jantar Mantar, and we participated in it, and AISA activists were there, we had mobilized for it. And then when we went back from the protest, suddenly being part of a protest was a matter of great scrutiny, because I mean, very rightly, people did not know who these people who were claiming to be representatives of the Cockroach Janata Party were, what their current political affiliations were. Some of them were in AAP before, but what were their current political affiliations? What did they want? Whether these protests were just a way of letting off steam that was building up against the current regime, or whether it was something more malicious and in fact a setup, sponsored and a subsidiary of the RSS. That's what also everybody was saying. But I think beyond all of this, when we got down on the 6th of June for the protest, and then there was a protest in Lucknow, which AISA activist, Comrade Manish, who was also on hunger strike with me, he was the one who was mobilizing for it, who was from permissions to campaigns. He was mobilizing for it, and then Abhijit, Deepke and others reached out to us, and then we invited Abhijit for the protest in Lucknow. Then CJP got in touch with our comrades in Bangalore, comrades Lekha and Clifton, and it was organized jointly by student organizations, etc., and then in other places. So in all of these places, there was one consistent, and that was that the common people, the common students, they did not care who these people were. Because in the past 12 years...
You mean who the protesters were?
Who the protesters were,
or who their
the
leader,
CJP.
right.
Yeah, exactly. As in who the CJP people were, who they were now affiliated with. They were not really bothered about that. Because the anger against the BJP and the fact that it has become a normal part of the lives of the students of this country, that if you prepare for an examination, there is a very 50-50 chance that it might get leaked, and there is a 50-50 chance that your exam will not get leaked. And this is accepted by everybody in this country. It's accepted by...
leak will happen.
That the leak will happen. It's accepted by TV media. It's accepted by the parents who put in all of their financial resources into sending their children to a coaching institution or to private institutions. It's accepted by them, and it's accepted by the students of this country. And it need not even be a very central examination like the medical entrance exam or the JEE exam for engineering entrance. Something as basic as the Lekpal exam or the UPSI exam. So from a low-level, low-ranking official in the police to a doctor, all of these exams get leaked in this country. And from students from villages where there is no robust educational system to cities like Kota, Sikar, Delhi, which are hubs for coaching. All of these were affected. Students who were living in villages, students who were living in cities, Everybody was affected by this crumbling, completely rotten system of entrance examinations and education. So what was different this time was that all of that anger that has been building up for the past few years, all of that got channelized into something which people thought was a fun thing. The CJP was a satirical platform. It was something that you could make fun of.
So you were saying that these protests were different because they didn't know who the leaders were, and they didn't really care.
Yeah, they didn't really care. And I think a lot of things coincided. First was the fact that the Chief Justice called young people or RTI activists or social media influencers cockroaches. Now, the term cockroaches has been used in history again and again for a section of the population that was unwanted. It has been used during ethnic cleansing against ethnic groups that were facing violence. It has been used for the longest time for the working people, for the poor people. It has been used in this country for Muslims. It has been used for Dalits. It has been used for a wide section of the people, all of them unwanted in this society. So that was one incident that coincided. The second incident was the fact that there was such massive paper leak in the NEET examinations this year as well. It happened in 2024 when we were sitting on Jantar Mantar. We occupied Jantar Mantar
There were
for 12
protests
days.
then as well.
There were protests then. And even then, there was increasing pressure on Dharmendra Pradhan. And we know because we were protesting and when we were talking to the media or other political people, they were telling us that there is a lot of pressure and it was feeling like he was going to resign. Dharmendra Pradhan was going to resign. But then it did not happen. And then again this year, the paper leak happened. And it was not just the paper leak which happened. The 12th board examination happened and they brought in a new system of marking, the OSM, in which lakhs upon lakhs of students were affected. There were students who were writing on social media, showing their answer sheets and saying that, look, this handwriting and the answer sheets of all my other question papers, the handwriting doesn't match. I've been marked for an answer sheet that I did not even write. And those students were being called Pakistanis and anti-nationals. That coincided. The CUET UG exam, which happens throughout the country, one exam for entrance for undergrad courses. That exam happened, the general exam. Students were called to their center. They were made to sit down in their centers for 3 hours. And after 3 hours, they were told that the server was down, so their exam would happen some other day. But the second shift of the same exam, that happened. So the question papers are fairly the same. It's just an up-down of the questions. So that happened. And then while the protests were going on, while we were sitting on a hunger strike, the UGC NET sociology exam happened. One day before the exam, there was a PDF which was getting circulated online. And from that PDF, about 120 to 160 questions were the same as the questions in the exam next day. So the fact that there was so much pressure on the government, and by all means, they would have wanted that no paper leaks happen, no mismanagement takes place, no technical glitches happen. But the system is so...
So is it sheer mismanagement? What?
Not just sheer mismanagement.
Or callousness?
I would say they've erected a system which not only creates opportunities for exam leaks, in fact, the NTA serves as a front for this entire paper leak mafia. I would say that. And we in the student movement strongly believe that it's not a technical glitch that is happening in the system, or it's not some few individuals which are corrupt, which are causing problems. The entire system has now been designed and reconstructed in such a way that even if the government wants, they cannot escape paper leak. At the height of the protests, on the perhaps the 18th or the 19th day of our hunger strike, of the hunger strike of Sonam Wangchuk, an examination is happening and the paper is getting leaked. Can you imagine the sheer incapability of the system to deal with examinations, an examination that they conduct every year? That examination they're not able to hold properly. So it was all of these things that coincided at the right place at the right time, and the aggregate anger of so many years consolidated itself into the mass scale protests that we saw in the country. And it was so beautiful because earlier, how do you suppress protests? One is that you label them with things that are considered worse than anything else, which is calling somebody an anti-national.
Worse than cockroach.
Worse than cockroach, calling somebody an anti-national, calling somebody a Pakistani, calling them American agents or Chinese agents or Pakistani agents. So that was seen as those were seen as extremely shameful, or something that after which people would just be quiet. People would just stop talking. Once your public trial happens on Godi media, you would go silent, because then it's not just a few BJP people who think that you're a bad apple or that you're bad for the country.
And for someone like you,
Yeah.
who comes from a AISA background,
Yeah.
is it worse? I mean,
Yeah.
Huh?
I am from JNU, I am from a left organization. So a lot of these allegations and abuses that they throw, they are aimed at us. All of it started from JNU.
They must be feeling bad that you become one of the faces of the protest.
I'm sure they're crying tears.
Yeah, and because you've been giving interviews,
Yeah.
everybody, even the Godi media wants to talk to you.
Oh, it is so funny that these Godi media people who would come for the protests, their mics would be there, but our protests were consistently absent from their news channels. The only times we would get any coverage would be when Dharmendra Pradhan would call us terrorists, or Nitin Nabeen would call us viruses. So the only publicity we got from them was negative publicity. And now it is so funny because they are having to call us on their news channels, and they can't even misbehave with us. Because if they misbehave with us, the entire young generation is going to be up in arms. So even they have to behave properly with us. And the maximum that a Godi media anchor has tried to misbehave with me, they have tried to say that, oh, but the Gen Z is not just with you. The Gen Z is also with the BJP. They vote.
That video the BJP has made.
Yes.
It's quite laughable, actually.
Yes. So that is happening. And somewhere or the other now what they're trying to do is that they're trying to pit student organizations against the CJP, which we are resolutely denying. We are saying that this movement was a hard work of a lot of people, including the CJP spokesperson.
Which is a fact, I guess. Yeah.
It is a fact. And the student organizations. So all of this victory is ours. All of this victory was won united by all of us. And no matter how much you try, you can't divide us now. Everybody knows that all of us sat day and night at Jantar Mantar, and we won this. And something I think which I would like to point out again and again, and which I do point out again and again, how these protests were different from the others was that, like I was saying earlier, the Godi media channels, which would portray protesters as people who have nothing better to do, or leftist cabal, or JNU motivated people who just want to protest because they want to destabilize the nation. There were no takers for this kind of narrative. And specifically,
or the Hindu Muslim.
Or the Hindu Muslim.
No, but they tried. I mean, the number of people, including with Junaid and other people, the way Muslims were picked up. I saw that some students in Jamia also were picked up at night, but they were released.
Yeah.
So, did you find a lot? I mean, was that Hindu Muslim effort also there?
I mean, there was, of course, an effort from our side. And the fact that, there was an active attempt that we would put out that narrative, because these protests were not just about Dharmendra Pradhan's resignation. Of course, there have been repeated demands for his resignation over the years. But this protest was also about the fact that the kind of politics that has prevailed in this nation, where even when you make an attempt to fight for what is right, to fight for example, equal citizenship, to fight for against the farm laws, to fight for against sexual harassers being in the government, as in the case of the restless protest, or to fight for workers' rights, as was in Gurgaon, Manesar, all of these places. So, during all of these protests, the government consistently divided protesters from one another. It was very easy, and the government did it so well, with using a lot of institutions, using the media, using social media, using everything in their power. They would say that the citizenship protests were protests by Muslims. They would say that the farmers' protests were protests by Khalistanis. They would say that these workers' protests were protests by antisocial elements. They would constantly name and label these protesters.
I mean, trying to demean democratic protests.
Yeah, trying to demean democratic protests, and constantly trying to tell the broader section of the society that, look, this doesn't concern you. It's only the concern of a few people. Let them scream and shout. You maintain your distance. And they also ensured that these people maintained their distance by the sheer state repression that these other protests faced. The level of repression that the equal citizenship protests faced, the prosecution that the students faced in that, the prosecution that the farmers faced during the farmers' protest and other protests. This protest, these student protests, they found it very difficult to label these protests as left protests or Dalit student Ambedkarite protests or Muslim protests. They found it very difficult to do it while the protests were going on, because in the protest itself, there was a very big and large-scale participation of women, of people from marginalized gender identities, of Muslims, of people from the Sikh community. So it was a very good space in which
It's
to
like a
exist.
rainbow
Yeah.
coalition. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we as student organizations, specifically we as AISA, whenever we got the mic, we consistently talked about the fact that this movement is not just telling us that the powers, no matter how repressive they are, can be fought. This movement is telling us that if we hold each other's hand, if we fight united in this struggle against this regime which seems all powerful and all repressive, we can register a victory. And the kind of uh, politics of hate they have been peddling for the past 12 years, that will stand exposed, that will stand defeated only if we stand against each other, stand with each other. And that somewhere or the other was a very resounding success in terms of narrative also. That is why once the protests were nearing, once the conversations were going on, and it was clear that the government would agree to, if not all, some of our demands, they started picking up people. It happened with Junaid, Mohammed Junaid. We met him yesterday. He has a robust team of lawyers now, so he's better. He's doing well. He feels like he's supported by people. He feels like the people, the young students of this country are standing behind him and they're going to fight. If anything happens to him, they're going to be on the streets. And the kind of witch hunt that happened in Bihar. I was in Bihar 3 days ago.
It seems to be. Would you? What is the kind of information you have? Is this witch hunt continuing in other states, or is it?
So,
or have there been some releases of student detainees as well?
No. There have been a release of student detainees now everywhere. News has started coming in. In Bihar also, people started getting released. So there was an earlier release of about 355 people who were juveniles and young women. They were released by the police earlier, 3 days before they were released. But yesterday, the rest of the people, over 300 students, so there were over 600 arrests made by the Bihar police from 24th to the 26th. There were over 600 arrests made, in which the way we have seen the state functioning, dividing protesters and students along lines of Muslim protesters and the rest, along lines of Dalit protesters and the rest. These kind of narrative that the state peddles, that was being picked up by the police, and the police was specifically targeting students based on their names. There were Muslim students who were being told कि तुम्हारा encounter कर देंगे. There were Dalit students whose names the police was asking, and when they realized that he was a Dalit student, he faced intimidation and violence at the hands of the Bihar police. That was happening. But as of today, most of the students have been released. There are a few students who.
And this is about Bihar.
This is about Bihar.
Okay. And what about other states?
In Bengal also, few students have been released, and the kind of repression that we thought was getting built up, because even Shubhendu Adhikari, he put out a statement saying that we're going to make 70 more arrests, and under laws like the NSA, the Gunda Act, they were putting in charges against under those acts. So that conversation has now died down, and it seems like people will be released even in Bengal. Few students have been released, few more are going to be released. There were about 16 students in total who were released. 14 were released earlier, out of which 13 were Muslim students. And I think Bengal is seeing, ever since the BJP came to power, Bengal is seeing a politics of vengeance against Muslims, against the working class there. And that is clearly being reflected in the arrests that are being made of students also. In Assam, we got to know that students are getting released. In Mumbai, we haven't got an update because there were 2 students who were arrested there. We are trying to get an update
Right.
from there. But overall, it seems like the pressure that we were building after these protests happened, legal pressure was being built. There were cases filed everywhere in different states, as well as the Supreme Court and the High Courts. That pressure, along with calls for protests. So there was a protest march that happened in Kolkata. There was a call on the 30th of July that we had given that if you do not release all the students, we are going to have protests all over Bihar. I think that is working.
Right.
The fact that there are protests happening even in Delhi and people are overwhelmingly standing in support. And this slogan that not even one of our people we are going to leave behind. This movement is not complete. This movement is not successful unless and until all of those students across the country who have been detained for protesting against paper leaks are released and all cases against them have been taken back. This narrative has really caught on and students are standing with each other. And I think because of that, the government is,
Right.
abiding.
I want to pick your brains, Neha. I mean, you're obviously, you've seen this government for the last 12 years at close quarters. So what I want to ask you now is that the protests are there. I mean, they seem to have really galvanized a section of people whom we possibly thought were apolitical. They've shown themselves to be very political, actually.
Yeah.
Especially the young people, they give us a lot of hope. But what I want to ask you is that will these protests, have any kind of effect on how the system itself has been working, whether it's the election commission, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's the bureaucracy? Today it doesn't matter who is in the bureaucracy because the response is all the same. Earlier, as journalists, we would look at, who was appointed to X job or Y job. It's no longer relevant. So what I want to ask you is that, do you think that these protests have the potential of affecting other people to just do their jobs, in a fair manner?
I actually, this is, I think, beyond Dharmendra Pradhan's resignation. I think one of the things that will remain with me, even after many, many years from today, is the thing that during the protests and even during the hunger strike, while we were sitting on a hunger strike, people, erstwhile BJP supporters, old people, middle-aged people, people who we used to make fun of as WhatsApp uncles and all, they would come up, they would sit on the beds that we were sleeping in during the hunger strikes. And I don't know, I can't even count how many people have cried in front of me. And when it started happening in the beginning, I couldn't really understand. It started happening from the day of the hunger strike. As the hunger strike started, people got more and more emotional, I think. They got more and more emotional about the fact that they could see. And it was the same people who would come after 4 days or 5 days, but there would also be completely new people who would be following us on social media, and then they would make that trip from Jaipur, Maharashtra, Bihar, even Assam, Manipur, they would make that trip from these states and they would come visit us for nothing else but to apologize. They would come, they would sit on our beds, they would cry. They would cry for half an hour, 45 minutes, and they would apologize and they would say that it is their fault that the BJP came to power. It is their fault that they brought the BJP to power again and again. And now they said this, and these are their words again in different ways. They said it. We voted for the BJP. हम इनको बार बार वोट देते रहे, ये सरकार बनाते रहे, और अब हमारी वजह से तुम भूखी बैठी हुई हो या हमारी वजह से 22 स्टूडेंट्स की जान चली गई. There were students who committed suicide after the NEET paper leak. Their family members came. They apologized to us. They said that I voted for the BJP. I made my entire family vote for the BJP. And now nothing in this world can bring back my son. All of these things were said to us by people who we had never met before, who we did not know, who did not know us. All of them apologized to us. And that is why I said that, earlier the same people who would be, clapping at their television screens at protesters being called anti-national or Pakistanis, their TV screens were lying silent after the 20th violence. I mean, it was lying silent even before, I would say. But after the 20th July violence, there were no takers. There were no takers for BJP ministers, the narrative of the BJP ministers that, oh, we felt so threatened that the protesters were coming for our very lives. Nobody believed it. Nobody believed that 15-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds who were trying to march to the parliament, who were trying to raise the demand for a better education system, for Dharmendra Pradhan's resignation, was after anybody's lives. Nobody believed it. It was parents, not even joking. Amongst those young people were parents who were coming to the protest for the first time. They were bringing their own children to the protest for the first time, who today have lathi marks on their bodies, who were affected by tear gas shells. It was these very parents who used to vote for the BJP who are now standing shoulder to shoulder to us in this struggle. And I think that is what scared the BJP government so much. In fact, what do I talk about other parents? My family is staunch BJP supporter, and we have a very big disagreement in my house. My mother, she came on the 19th, one day before the Sansad March. She came to the protest. She saw people who she used to think were, who she never agreed with and who she asked me to stay away from. In fact, scolded me and tried every emotional blackmail in the mother's playbook to ask me to stay away from them. She saw those people sleeping on the ground because there was a narrative that I could be picked up, or my other comrades who were on hunger strike, we could be picked up on the day of the 20th or before the 20th, so that the momentum could be dissipated. There was conversation. We got to know that the police would lathi charge inside Jantar Mantar on the 20th when all of this was happening. My mother heard this. And 15 minutes after that, the lathi charge happened and the tear gas shells happened. She saw dozens upon dozens of students coming into our tent because we had 3 doctors and medical supplies in our tent. We were hunger strikers. We could not join because we were not in the condition. So we were there along with a few other comrades and 3 doctors. So dozens upon dozens of protesters, 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, came to our tent with a broken hand. One came with a broken hand. The other one had a lathi here on the neck, so it was all swollen. His neck was bent. It was curved because he had a lathi on his neck. He came. There was a woman who came. Her leg had been opened by, I don't know how, by those, I think those nails that they put in the lathis, that all of that happened. Her leg was slit open. My mother saw all of that. And the police that she believed was so honest, was so sincere, was so never, I don't know. I think she believed all good things over the security forces and the police. She saw what they did to protesters. And the day Dharmendra Pradhan resigned, she called me and she asked me to congratulate everybody in AISA and tell them that they did a good job. So I mean, it's not just other parents. My own house. I saw this happening in my own house. And this is what truly, I think, scared the BJP into asking and getting Dharmendra Pradhan's resignation, because the people who were there at Jantar Mantar after the 20th, they were no more just asking for Dharmendra Pradhan's
They
resignation.
were asking for Modi to go. I
They
mean, it
were
was very
asking for
clear.
Modi to
In fact,
go.
the targeting, if you look at the posters and the slogans, related more to Modi.
It was more to Modi. All of that anger got channelized to Amit Shah, got channelized to the Commissioner of Police, got channelized to Modi.
So you were talking about your parent, I mean, your own family.
Yeah.
So how you dealt with that? I mean, is it, I mean, you just do what you want, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very long time since this disagreement has been going on in my house. So
Is it since you came to Delhi, or?
yeah,
Okay.
since I came to Delhi and then I started being political, it's ever since then that this disagreement has existed in my house. It becomes very violent sometimes, the disagreement and all of that. So I think I have been independent even in terms of my finances, more or less, or the decisions I make in my life ever since, in my second or third years of bachelor's, because that was a breaking point in the kind of
Because you see,
politics
I
wanted to
saw
do.
on a lot of social media platforms, children severing their relations with their parents. I mean, that was the other thing which I saw.
Yeah.
I mean, I never went to the protests, but I could see that there was anger against the government, and there was a lot of anger against the parents and uncles also.
Yeah.
As if they've just sort of, I mean, somebody was saying, oh, even the paper leaked, and even then my parents said there's nothing wrong with the ruling dispensation.
Yeah, I think this was an overwhelming emotion at Jantar Mantar. There were students who were saying, "हम तो झूठ बोल के आए हैं." There were students who were saying, I'm ashamed. My father was saying, कि नहीं पुलिस ने तो ठीक किया, मैंने बोला मुझे नहीं रहना आपके पास, मैं प्रोटेस्ट में आ गया. All of these kind of things were happening because, it's true. Our older generations or people in our family who were staunch BJP supporters because the BJP gave them a false idea of what their politics was going to be. The BJP constantly told them that their politics was about Indian culture, was about Indian traditions. And that is what they were standing for, while they were destroying those very traditions, that very culture. So our elders thought that it was for them probably a matter of status quo in the house, maintaining a matter of status quo in the house. So when the BJP told them that we stand for Indian values, we stand for culture, we stand for traditions, they perhaps thought that the BJP would ensure that their kids would stay close to them, kids would, learn the kind of stories that they learned or believed in the kind of ethos or values that they believed in. But that was not true. And the young people know it now.
And they demonstrated.
And they demonstrated it, that none of what you say is what it is. And now I guess even the older generations know that it was not really about traditions. It was not about India. It was not about Indian culture. It was just being in power. It was just the RSS's way, the BJP's way of packaging itself to the Indian masses that they seem more palatable. Because coming back from the fact that the RSS was a militant organization. Right from its conception, it has betrayed what the Indian people have stood for. The RSS had betrayed the Indian freedom struggle, while young people like myself, like the people who are at Jantar Mantar, while they were participating in the Quit India movement, while they were laying down their lives, while people who were in the British police, while they were giving up their jobs, saying that we will no more serve these masters, British masters, we will stand with the people of this country, where the police and the security people, Indian people who were in their armies, in their police forces, while they were refusing to fire on Indian protesters, while Indians were asking for freedom, they refused to fire upon them. While this is what India was doing, the RSS was taking out leaflets upon leaflets talking about how the young people should only concern themselves with their own affairs and not participate in the Quit India movement. That's what the RSS was doing. Nobody can unwrite the fact that the RSS and its many functionaries are responsible for the assassination of Gandhi. Nobody who has read history, who knows history, who wants to understand history and make sure that it does not get repeated, can go back from the fact that at the peak of the freedom struggle, where this entire country was galvanizing itself into one united force against the British, the RSS was constantly peddling even then an anti-Muslim narrative.
So you think the young people you spoke to, do they get some of these points that you're making?
Yes, now they do, because even in Jantar Mantar, a lot of the posters that came up, they were about this. They were about the fact that you believe in Godse, we believe in Bhagat Singh. That's the principal difference between you and I, and that is why you must go. People who believe in Godse will not govern this country. This kind of narrative was constantly being repeated by people. This kind of narrative that you keep saying that this country is not for Muslims. You keep talking about a Hindu Rashtra. I am a Hindu. I don't want your Hindu Rashtra. This kind of posters were also there at Jantar Mantar. And that is why all of those people who are saying, no, don't make it political. These people should know it's as political as Jantar Mantar can get, as political as any protest can get. Jantar Mantar was that political. It was talking about the RSS's legacy of betraying the people. It was talking about how they stood for Godse and we stand for Bhagat Singh. It was talking about how their politics of division has brought the country to this place where paper leak is not a big deal, but Hindu-Muslim narrative suddenly gets all the eyeballs. They were constantly talking about that. So I think these protests revealed so much about what the young people of this country do not want anymore from the ruling dispensation. And I think what this movement gave, the lessons that this movement taught to all of us in this country was beyond the fact that you can take accountability from fascists as well. It was, in fact, the thing that BJP's politics of hatred, BJP's politics of division based on caste, based on religion, based on gender, and all other things, all of that can be defeated. That is one most resolute thing that I will carry for the rest of my life. And that is why when I came back from the hunger strike, and I was talking on the mic, that is what I said, that, the young people must remember this feeling right now. This feeling of what it is to fight for one another and not against one another. Because that is what we have known in the past 12 years. But now, the what we have learned from the citizenship protests, from the farmers' protests, from the wrestlers' protests, from the workers' protests, all of these lessons became aggregated into this movement where we stood with one another, where we fought for one another. And the young people of this country must remember this feeling, because this is India. That is not India. And in the coming years, we will be called upon again and again to remember this feeling.
That's the other thing I wanted to ask you. You think that this momentum will be sustained, and you think that, I mean, it's not easy to mobilize,
Yeah.
you're in the business, so you know that it's not always easy to mobilize
It
people.
isn't, yeah.
So do you think that, these young people, not just those who were present, but those who were watching from, wherever on their mobiles or whatever, you think that this has sort of seeped into their minds in a sense?
I do think that it has seeped into their minds. But I also think that once such a big movement is nearing the completion of its immediate goals, I would not say nearing the completion of the movement, but its immediate goals, I think it falls upon those people who received immense support while the movement was going on, people like me. I got so much support from people who I did not know, who did not know me. I got so much support from these people. And now I guess it falls upon us, people like me, people like spokespersons of the CJP, people like the student organizations and their activists who received such support from the young people. It falls upon us that with everything that we have within our being, with all the inspiration that we got from the people and the students who participated in these protests, from the victory, the encouragement of the victory of this movement, we give everything that we received from this movement to the movements that remain incomplete, to the movements that are currently being fought in this country, because our movement was part of the larger fight in this country for democracy, larger fight in this country for preserving the democratic, socialist, secular fabric of what this country was built upon. So I guess it falls upon me, my comrades, my other friends, the young people who were part of these protests, who led these protests, who exposed the government's narrative in these protests. It falls upon all of us that we do not let this momentum die down. We convert this momentum into the momentum of the other fights that are being fought in this country, be it the fight against SIR, which is something so fundamental. It changes the very nature of how the Indian people will exist. It creates, because it's not just about the fact that your name is not in the SIR so you can't vote. It is about the fact that people whose names are not appearing, they are being denied basic government facilities. So what you wanted to do with the NRC, you're doing here with the SIR. And that is what is happening across. In Karnataka, in Delhi, in Bengal, we saw disenfranchisement of such a big section of the population. That is an important fight that we are fighting. The fight against delimitation, that is an important fight that we are fighting. The fight for workers' right, for women's reservation. All of these things are very important fights that we are fighting in this country. And the momentum from this young students' movement must also translate to this movement. That's how we see it.
Well, on that note, I mean, obviously the protests have been, they've really not just galvanized India, but they've galvanized people in South Asia, internationally. It's been quite inspirational. Well, on that note of hope, because there's been a lot of despondency in this country in the last 12 years.
Yes.
So, well, on that note of hope, thank you, Neha Bora, for talking to SpeakEasy and Frontline.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.